I'm so excited.
Huh.
You can tell I'm beaming, but I've been wanting to record you, Elizabeth. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Elizabeth McIntire. How long have we known each other?
Ah, long time, 12 years, 10 years, long time.
Sounds about right. Since before I was a dietitian,
Yes.
and that was 10 years ago. So before that, yeah.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see you because I felt like my brain could be better.
hmm
And I want everyone who listens to my podcast and listens to me in sessions and life, my neighbors, I want them to know what you do, what brain integration is, because it's helped me dramatically in all aspects of life. And I try to explain it to people, and you do a much better job. So, what is brain integration therapy?
Um, well, first, thank you. It has been a joy to work with you over this um, decade plus. Uh, Brain integration is a hands-on technique that reconnects neural pathways in the brain. It's a hands-on technique that also works without hands-on, which is fascinating.
Right,
It,
we've worked together over Zoom, which
yeah,
also
uh,
even more mind-blowing.
yes. Um, Brain integration looks at all of our basic functions. So, how easy is it to rest comfortably inside your own skin? How centered are you on the earth? How do you see? How do you listen? Um, how do you balance? How easy or difficult is it to regulate mental concepts, emotional information? It's a way of looking at all the things that make up being human and says, what at the foundational level of everything might be blocked, right? Where are signals going to the wrong place at the wrong time? Where are the two hemispheres not talking to each other? And they should be talking to each other. Um, and the way that brain integration does that, I use kinesiology, which is muscle testing. If I'm seeing somebody in the office, then I'm using their body. If I'm seeing them on Zoom, then I can surrogate for them and muscle test myself. Um,
Okay, just for the
yeah.
audience, since they haven't done it yet, I
hmm
know what you're talking about, but a lot of my audience knows kinesiology. They're physical therapists, they're athletes, they're
hmm
physicians, they're nurses, they're all the gamut of, you know, kinesiology experts, personal trainers, strength and conditioning specialists, I think I already said that.
Yeah.
Um, but so for example, I remember, so people can picture this. I remember, I think when I first saw you, when I was like not a teenager, but maybe just
hmm
um you noticed something about my brain, and I don't know if you noticed with my eye movements or my voice or both, or like touching the back of my neck. Um I'm ambidextrous,
hmm
and you said something about, like, I want you to explain how you noticed that I have like a delay
hmm
in processing, but then you explain I process more information. There's just a switching. What is that?
Yeah. So, um, looking for where is the brain processing information at we have two hemispheres. Um, we simplify brain function to talk about people as like right brain or left brain, more logical or more creative. And the truth is that the brain is so complex.
Yeah.
Um, and we use the whole brain for everything. That whole we only use 10% is a complete myth, not true. But there are, you know, this is why brain integration in its subtlety is looking at where do we begin, right? So if we're starting to process a logical concept, if we're starting to do a math problem, we should initiate that in the left hemisphere.
Right, you started off with math, I remember, testing me.
Yes. For a right-handed person, it would be in the left hemisphere. For a left-handed person or an ambidextrous person, it would be the opposite. So it would be in the right hemisphere.
But what if
Um,
you're dexterous?
it, so with our logic hemisphere is always opposite the dominant hand.
Ah,
So that's why the world says left brain meaning math, but it's just because most of the world is right-handed. For
oh,
a left-handed person and an ambidextrous person, their right hemisphere is in the opposite place. The point is that we want wherever your logic hemisphere is, we want math to start there. And then go wherever it needs to. Go to visual memory, go to, all sorts of places, right? And when we notice, oh, this is going to the wrong place first, um, that that means there's going to be a delay downstream.
and does that sometimes happen when a left-handed person is stuck being taught as a right-handed person
Yes.
or part of it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly I notice now the complexity over the years of what brains will tell me. I have lots of brains when I meet people and do this very simple, I just really just muscle test. So push on your arm gently and touch the hemisphere where the signal should be happening. And
Uh,
it's a simple location test that's incredibly effective. And what's going on with people is always a combination of very simple, little tiny dysfunctions that cause downstream big problems, right? And every person I work with, every person I meet on the street is incredibly complex and unique.
mhm.
And so, in this place of most of the people that I see have really rich and unique life stories. They have often tried many things before they find me. And many of the things that work for lots of people didn't work for them, which is why they end up finding me. And so in the intersectionality of all of that, in the intersection of a head injury, or, I'm a professional athlete and I have performance anxiety, or I have always had a learning disability, but I'm really super intelligent, so I masked that learning disability, or
I need to pause you right there because you just made me think of Tom Brady.
yeah, totally.
Okay, there's been a lot of documentaries coming out about the Patriots, and then there was the most hilarious roast on Netflix with Tom Brady. If you haven't seen it, I'm gonna watch it again soon. It made me laugh so hard. I'm so glad they did that. In the documentary Dynasty,
Mhm,
that was about the Patriots in general. Towards the end, I think the guys talked about how after they were so used to winning the Super Bowl,
mm,
and they would go to the Super Bowl and not win, they
mm,
felt like they were in a withdrawal similar to like a heroin withdrawal or a intent like a oxycontin withdrawal. They were like, we felt so much more terrible after winning, and then not winning.
yeah.
We were a disaster. What?
Mhm,
So, like, I know football players get, they have a lot of head trauma usually they're dealing with. I came to you because I had been a hockey player
mhm,
and I fell back and hit my head on the ice once,
mhm,
once. And I knew it affected at least the anatomy of my neck, right?
mhm.
And I was like, I really feel like I could be having better blood flow. And
Mhm,
you had an ad up at Whole Body Solutions in Quincy, Massachusetts, where I went for chiropractic. And you had an ad up about how athletes who had had a concussion or symptoms of a concussion, whether it was properly diagnosed or not, they're still not most of the time, very frustrating. But you gave a presentation about the benefit of brain integration for an athlete who had had a um uh any kind of brain injury or concussion.
mhm.
So what what are some of the benefits of brain integration for athletes with these? Like what would you do for someone like Tom Brady who's like just lost the Super Bowl?
Yeah. So those are two, it's a beautiful question. Those are two different things and they
Or there, sorry,
need
yeah,
different.
there are two
So,
different things, like the injury and then the loss. Even
right.
if
But
they got to the Super Bowl, um, let's focus on that first. Like, what does what part of the brain makes it feel like a drug withdrawal?
so
Is that the
in
emotional one?
um so what I would say about the whole of your question is that in meeting someone in injury, well, then, I think of the brain like a house. And sometimes I meet people and mess has accumulated over time, and
Yeah.
we're doing the mess of living, the mess of trauma, the mess of dysfunctional habits learned in the environment, right? And so sometimes the straightening up is like that.
You're
And
right.
it's a subtle piece. And sometimes, like there was an earthquake and somebody hit their head. And
Yeah.
and then there's different those symptoms tend to be bigger, they tend to be more noticeable. When they go away, they tend to be really noticeable. So those are two different things. And I would say that the experience of winning, 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 and then not feels very much like an earthquake.
Ooh.
And it isn't a head injury, it's an emotional experience, right? But
Right.
it's
Motion part of
a
the brain.
it's an emotional experience that lives inside the body that talks to all of the neurotransmitters in the reward system, um, that also talks to everything every one of those players has ever learned about themselves and what defines their worth.
Mm.
So if I were to work with every member of the team after that to say like, hey, you guys feel like, this massive, major distressing event has occurred. And many of you are very likely having a very hard time because of this. And part of that for some people could be about regulating, hey, where's my nice dopamine hit? That's the part that feels like drugs. Others of you feel like, I feel like a fraud. Like others of you could be remembering things from a really long time ago. All of those sessions would be different.
Right.
Um, but I can know, having had this experience, right? Whether it's a falling on your head or a big distressing emotional experience. For a professional athlete, it's not winning the Super Bowl. For somebody else, it could be getting divorced or losing a parent or, like ongoing big life stresses.
Or wait, can I stop you again?
Yeah.
Because the this has happened to me many times. I know I've talked to you about this. For me, whenever I've had an injury, the worst part of the injury is not the injury. It's when people that I'm supposed to trust don't listen to me. And
Mm,
like you said something to me once that I'm so calm in how I express my pain that people
mm,
don't hear me and I should maybe yell and make a big deal about it. And I'm like, that just doesn't come naturally. I'm not a, I'm like, why aren't people just listening to the words that I'm saying? Like, hi, I'm in a lot of pain. It would be great if you could take me to the hospital right now. I, I,
Mhm.
I feel like that's sufficient. But you've told me that for whatever reason that doesn't work for me. And sometimes it has to do with where I'm sitting or laying down or um do you know what I'm trying to say?
So, yes, in this place of when something has happened, could be a physical injury, could be an emotional injury, could be sudden, could be long, uh, old and long. When we can no longer regulate around whatever that is. So some people hit their head and they feel fine. Some people get injured and they say, hey, take me to the hospital. And people take them to the hospital and it's no big deal. That is, I had an experience. I knew what my needs were. I was able to articulate them. Those needs were met. I'm good to go. They're
Mhm.
not going to lose brain integration. What brain integration means is really the ability to continue to be a part of the world, to continue to see the world and hear the world and voice your needs in the world and know what those needs are, right? And stand on your own 2 feet or sit down when you need to, all of that. And when we look at people who can't manage all of that, often what I'm seeing is they can't breathe the way they normally breathe, and they don't sound the way they normally sound.
Mhm.
Now, in what I just heard you say, hey, if I'm really hurt, my style, the way that I exist on the earth is that I'm going to say to somebody, I'm really hurt. Can you take me to the hospital now? And my expectation is that that logic hemisphere driven, here are the words, hear them, believe them, follow through on them, that is enough. That's sufficient. And what I notice about that is that even in telling that, there's a lack of melody. If you were a baby, you wouldn't say words, you would just be like, bah! Right? And then someone would respond to that. When people are in pain or are in distress and either lose language completely and they're a grown man crying and just phonating, or some of the children I work with, they get upset about something and they stop saying words, they just default to animal sounds. I know, hey, your logic hemisphere is no longer available to you. You don't have the ability right now to find the words you want to find to tell me or anybody what's wrong, what's going on. There is also another place we can go that is hard for people who are not trained to listen deeply to folks, that where we lose all of that normal, joyful, and you know, melody that comes from the Gestalt hemisphere, or in your case, the left hemisphere. Which means that where somebody else would be like, please take me to the hospital, like now. And that melody, that intensity of sound in the way that you express your needs, it doesn't surprise me that they don't get heard. And so we can wonder and notice that and say, okay, this isn't about I need to change something about myself in order for the world to hear me. This is about, when I have needs, I'm not able to access the full range of my instrument in order to express them. That's funky.
Yeah. It's like I've just been thinking about how I just bought this keyboard and I used to play the piano and there's no pedals for the keyboard and I'm like, ugh, I'm missing this important part of my melody.
Totally, totally. Yeah.
Um, and you have a music background as well. So tell me, can you give an example of how, because people have commented on my voice more than once, in a good way or a bad way or a critical way or whatever. I'm not gonna name names, but a lot of people have said I have a soothing voice, I have a phone voice. I used to answer the phone when I worked at Boston Sports Club, and people loved it for whatever reason.
Mhm.
But there's pros and cons to my voice, I've learned. So when you hear, you can use me as an example or someone else, like, usually when I come see you, I'm laying down on a table, like a massage table, if you can picture that. And you'll have one hand on either the base of my neck or like one of my chakras. I don't know if I'm describing
Yeah,
that.
different points on the body or the frontal occipital hold, which is on your forehead and then at the opposite.
Yeah, usually, yeah, it's a lot of times like this.
Mhm.
Um, and then you'll either ask me to answer a question or say something specific. So what are you looking for or listening to, or both, in that situation?
So
Assessment.
my style of brand integration is to always be very clear that I am looking to make sure that anybody who comes in here for any reason can tolerate living inside their own skin, can find their own centeredness on the earth. It's hard to human. So I want to make sure people can human.
You
And
say that
then
a lot.
that from within that their self, that they can access all of the different parts of their own brain function. And that means I can access both hemispheres. I can, use the ascension fibers and the projection fibers to get to the front and the back of my head and the top and the bottom of my head. I can move around. There are these major pathways in the brain. And again, brain function is so complex. There's just trillions of things happening up there. I'm not talking to trillions of them. I'm talking to where do we begin? And I notice where we get a block, and I notice where we lose regulation, and I notice that happening in the body, or I notice that happening in the way that the voice sounds, in the way that people's eyes move,
Mhm.
in, the disruption of the environment, or I don't pay any attention to the environment. All of these things I'm noticing. And I just want to make sure that people can stand on the earth, see what's around them, hear what's there, and tolerate whatever that is, um, and stay regulated. What happens when I have figured out, oh, okay, we have a little bit of switching, going to the wrong place at the wrong time, or these two hemispheres could talk to each other better. Everybody who finds me, I've worked with people who were prisoner of war in Vietnam, right? She found a way to survive.
Right.
And so brains are amazing in that people live extraordinary lives and get by. And they find me when it becomes too distressing to get by.
Yes.
When we have figured out, hey, there's something going on with your eyes, or there's something going on with your speech, or there's something going on with your auditory processing, or your vestibular processing, or your thinking, or your feelings, like too many feelings, not enough feelings, whatever we're looking at. Once we get to the place of now it's time to really process, in my style of brain integration, that is when we talk. And in the conversation, what I ask you, what we discuss, I'm always noticing how does this how does this person sound? How is this person hearing? How how are they doing with this conversation? And usually, we tend to speed up when things are hard. Get it over with.
Yeah.
Get here, right? And then so it's
Yeah.
a lot of attuning to oneself, interoception, this ability to say, what is happening inside?
Ooh, that's a good word.
And some people, there's too much signal from the inside, and all of it drives them crazy. And other people, they just don't have a clue what's happening inside. So there's no like one is better and another is good. It's all, for me, my ethos is really about Can I find the center of things from which I can go anywhere? Um,
Yeah, and you're like almost a mechanic. You're like you start by doing an assessment of the functioning of the machine.
yeah, of all those pieces. And then when I notice that somebody has trouble with some part of the machine, with some part of the humaning, um, then there's a curiosity in figuring out why.
Yeah,
And
I love the why.
in all things, whether we're looking at your balance or we're looking at your eyes, there are several signals of healthy brain function, and the imagination is a big one. So a lot of what I talk to people about, whether they're stuck on something for work or with their kids or, with learning or with even being an athlete. I can't imagine not winning the Super Bowl is equally problematic to I can't imagine winning the Super Bowl, right? Like these
Right.
are
Right.
problematic statements simply because when we say I can't imagine, we're actually disclosing, oh, my brain won't let me go somewhere. And usually I will then say, well, can you imagine my friend Fred the hippopotamus come into my office and
Okay,
wearing
yeah.
like the whole thing? And people usually can. And then I will point out how easily our imagination, which is such an essential part of being human, it allows us to grow and develop into whatever it is that we grow and develop into. Um, when we notice, wow, it's really hard for me to imagine anything, we notice a block there. And so a lot of the processing is very deliberate in its imaginative approach and its creative approach. And it's, I notice that it's easy for you to go left, so let's go right, is a lot of what we're doing, and vice versa.
Okay, can you do a little assessment on me now? Like nothing deep, but like just to show how it works, like what you're looking for in my eyes and my voice. And
Mhm.
I'm gonna pick or like I don't know if you are thinking of anything that would be like not too vulnerable, but vulnerable
So
enough.
I can hear in your speech, right? If I were assessing your speech, I would notice that there is most of the time a real smoothness. When we first began working together, your thoughts tended to come out in a way that was really halting. So you would say something, and then there would be something else, and there were little pauses in the breath and in the way that thoughts flowed. And I would just breathe with you and meet that and notice that and think, where is that stress coming from? Is that stress the topic that we're discussing? Is that stress something in the diaphragm and the muscles of the speech mechanism? Is that something happening because there's a lot of noise and now trying to speak when it's loud? My brain can't do both of those things at once. Like I'm I notice something like that. And so today I can say that I hear a lot of smoothness, um, and that there are still little hiccupy moments that are you thinking deeply and then sharing it. And I don't hear a problem. I just hear the the last bits of that in the eagerness to say all that I'm thinking on my insides I want to get out.
I know. I'm like, how do I do it all in 30 minutes? Um, I'm realizing that as I'm saying it. And okay, I thought of an example that's not really that vulnerable at all. So we'll start with this one. You helped me study and prepare for my RD exam.
Hmm.
So this is just basic life, right?
Yeah.
Life, human lifing. And I think I came to you and I was like, I'm so nervous to take this exam. I haven't taken an exam in so long, and my entire life depends on it. and I hate fluorescent lights, and I don't know if I need a pencil or a pen, and if I'll have scrap paper, and you're like, "Oh my God, stop." Stop right there, and then
Uh-huh.
remember,
Yes.
and I
Yep.
passed on the first try, so it worked.
Yeah, and when people get, I mean, that in this specific example of test preparation, which I help people a lot with, what's getting stressed is called the hippocampal commissure. It's
Mm.
the commissure that connects the two sides of the hippocampus, which we need for memory. Um, And when that little tiny bridge collapses, usually because of stress, I'll see lots of things. I'll notice that your pupils dilate because you're afraid. And so where the limbic system is not doing all the things that it should. And if I were muscle testing both of your arms in person, they, instead of being able to hold out and stay strong, meaning both hemispheres are firing together, that commissure is strong, they would collapse. And so in noticing the stress of that, we can put that into the circuit. Um, what brain integration does when I hold your head is that it changes the blood flow.
Mm.
So that's the part that makes it hands-on. And we discovered in my field through the pandemic, we'd always been able to do stuff virtually or through a surrogate. But people experimented through the pandemic and realized I can see changes happening in real time, which is normal in person in my office, and it's also normal, um, in the mirroring and in the work that I do with reflexes through a screen. Um, it
But
works
okay,
both.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting so many times, but what I wanted the audience to know was you basically put me in the scenario of like you're taking the test today.
Mhm,
And one thing you helped me with was you said, okay, go to the test center before the day of the test, and it will change your brain. Um,
mhm.
and you were like, don't just go outside, go inside to see what the lighting looks like and what it feels like, and get it will tell your brain like what to not worry about, right? Something like that.
Yeah. So in the, because we are sensitive to what am I seeing and what am I hearing and what am I associating to, when we have a lot of anxiety, anything that we can do to feel more comfortable with an outcome, and to feel more comfortable with a setting, it's helpful.
Mm.
You would not have done well on that test and passed the first time if you had not prepared, if you had not studied, if you had not learned the material, right? Like brain integration doesn't put information in your head, but in that place of I did all of the prep work, and now when you put this particular looking exam in front of me and put a pencil in my hand, you know, I go blank. That brain integration absolutely helps with. And, depending on the situation and the scenario, that stress can really mask the ability that people have internally. Um,
Yeah.
so another assessment of speech would be that I know at the beginning of this podcast, my speech was much more halting, that I was speaking more slowly. I was kind of waiting for my brain to click into gear to get attuned to you in this moment.
You can do it to yourself.
Yeah. Well, I observe myself, I observe you, I observe the world. I don't turn that off. It's just me. Um, but then because this is the power of observation and why I do the interoception work with people that I do, because when we become part of being integrated means this feeling of I know myself. I've sort of discovered what sets me off, what sets me on the right course, all of that. And noticing, oh, yeah, this was a little more halting. This wasn't exactly how I would have loved to have said that.
Mm.
Well, then just breathing. I'm just noticing it's not the end of the world, right? Chatting with Nicole and
Well,
millions
it
of
doesn't
people.
help that I told you I wanted to do this like 37 minutes ago.
And I'm thrilled to be here. I think it's just we can all notice in those moments as an athlete, like when are people in the flow and when are they out of the flow? And being able to know what the flow is and how does one access that and what does it feel like when you're in it and what does it feel like when you're out of it, that is so much of my work. So brain integration itself is this simple technique that you have to study a lot and learn a lot about the brain in order to know why different problems are happening. But once you have that, the way that it helps people is really quite simple and basic. What I bring to my work is a lot of this, hey, and now that you can see, we're going to process what there is to see, right? Because a lot of, if we look out at the world, I'm thinking about the polar bears. So, and if I'm somebody whose life isn't going well or whose life is going well and that's hard to process, whatever we are wired to see what's hard. We see that first. And once we can breathe with that, then we can also see what's beautiful. And that's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, breathing is important. Um, so okay, this is only part one, but we're gonna end here because I want people to know how to find you. I think we've given them enough information that they're just gonna be like, well, of course I want to be a more functioning human. Or maybe they have a test coming up, or maybe they've had a traumatic brain injury, concussion, or maybe they're an athlete who wants to win,
Mhm.
like most of
All
us.
these things.
So how do people find you? And I'm gonna put this in the show notes too.
Awesome. So I'm at bostonbrainintegration.com. And if you just type Boston Brain Integration to Google, I'll pop right up.
All right, and I'll put that in the show notes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicole.
See you soon.
Yeah, totally.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.